Garrett Blevins here with an overview of intermediate training programs as outlined in Practical Programming for Strength Training. This is a follow-up to the Novice Programming Starting Strength, and I'm going to be talking about the Texas method today. Pretty much, if you remember, a novice is defined as someone who workout to workout can increase the amount of weight that they use for their sets and reps. They may alternate exercises here and there, such as doing overhead press on their A workout and bench press on their B workout that then alternate. But every time they do a certain exercise, they're adding 2.5 to 5 pounds, sometimes micro loading, but in general, those are the numbers used. At some point, though, 3 sets of 5 or 1 set of 5 for the deadlift or something, whatever your sets and reps are, they're going to not constitute enough of an overload event for you to disrupt homeostasis sufficiently to require you to recover and then produce a supercompensation. And so what you have to do is you have to increase the amount of volume that you're doing on a certain day so that it constitutes a proper overload event based on how adapted your body is to whatever stimulus it is. In this case, we're talking about lifting weights to get stronger. Now, once that happens and doing, 3x5 on your exercises isn't enough to drive progress, you have to up it. And pretty much the best way to do that is to increase the number of sets you're doing. Keep the reps the same and increase the number of sets. The Texas method, therefore, has a volume day, which includes 5x5s, a light day, which has 2 sets of 5, and then a test day, which is 1 set of 5 for a PR. So your intensity is going to be highest on that third day, whereas the volume is going to be the lowest. Even on the light day, even though your intensity is maybe 80% of your 5 rep max, the volume is still going to be more than your test day because you're doing 2 sets of 5. And then the first day, that 5x5 day, that's your big volume day, but you're not going to do that 5x5 with your 5 rep max. You'll do it with about 90% of your 5 rep max so that you can get through all of the sets. Now, you might be wondering why you wouldn't just do the 5x5 day followed by the 1x5 day, and here's why. You need to understand that you don't get strong by lifting heavy weights. You get strong by recovering from lifting heavy weights. It's all about the supercompensation. As your body is fatigued by a heavy volume day, you actually become weaker, and as your body's rebuilding of itself and the adaptation that comes from that allows you to be stronger. And so it's the recovery that becomes most important. The stimulus just has to be adequate to disrupt homeostasis sufficiently, whatever your baseline is. So that's why if you do that 5x5, since your body is used to 3x5s and is just adapted to that, if you start doing 5x5s, you're probably not going to be ready with the same amount of recovery time, maybe 72 hours that you've been using, to hit a PR on, maybe that'd be Wednesday. That 5x5 is going to be so taxing on your body that you're going to need more time to recover and supercompensate. Now, you don't want to do nothing in between. One, because doing nothing in between your workouts is not going to facilitate recovery best. Going in and using submaximal weights through the range of motion is going to be very helpful in recovery, one. Second, it's also going to help you practice the form and the techniques of the lifts with lighter weights so that you can focus even more on precision. And it's going to keep your neurological adaptation high as you could focus on lifting those lighter weights faster. You can actually increase the velocity of the weight because it's less than your normal working reps. And so the overall force production that you produce could be higher on that light day than any of your other days because of the submaximal nature of the weights. That could be important for sports training where force production is very important. And you need to be able to have a lot of force and force generation. And practicing that is going to be important. Your neurological adaptation is going to have to be such that you can recruit your muscle fibers quickly and a large proportion of them all at the same time in coordinated movements. That said, the Texas method functions on these 3 days, what I'm going to call the volume day, the light day, and then the heavy or the intensity day, where you're setting PRs. Now, the way that you would want to transition into this is after you've been on a novice program where you're trying to add weight every day, eventually on that you're going to start stalling out to where instead of hitting 3 sets of 5, let's say for your squat, you'll have 2 sets of 5 and maybe 1 set of 5 you can only do 4. If you have that just one time, that's no big deal. It could be a recovery issue. You could just need a little bit more rest in between sets. But if you find yourself when you add that 5 pounds on there or 2.5 pounds on each side, and you can only do 4 reps on your first set, even though you've just done your warm-ups. And as long as they're proper warm-ups and you've had good rest, and you can only start doing 4 reps. Once you've done 2 or 3 weeks where you're missing that sets of 5 and you're getting sets of 4 and sets of 3, then you know that it's time to move into an intermediate program like the Texas Method. When you do that though, you're not going to start that 5x5 with the same weight that you were using for your 3x5s in the starting strength program. Instead, take something about 90% of what your best 5 rep max is and use that for your Monday weights. You wouldn't want to jump in trying to use your PR weight for a 5x5 because that would be too taxing and it's going to throw you off. And really, since you're adding in this extra volume, almost doubling your volume, that could jack you up more than you needed to and maybe even cause overtraining over time if you just kept hitting that wall over and over again. So that said, use about 90% of your best 5 rep max to start that Monday volume protocol. Then use 80 to 90% of whatever you did on Monday for your light day. This is where you may need to feel out a little bit. Maybe that first week when you do the 5x5, it really shocks you. And so even though you're already using 90% of your best, you take 80% of that 90% and you use that as your lightweight. That might put you actually around 70% of your best 1 or 5 rep max. And so it's really going to be a light day where you're focusing on technique, speed, and you understand that this day is about recovery. So that light day is still about getting stronger, but it's not getting you stronger by increasing your fatigue. It's getting you stronger because it's assisting in recovery. And remember, it's recovering from lifting heavy weights that drives strength. Then you'll come back on the Friday, you've had an extra day that was light so that you've recovered, you've worked on your technique, and the whole focus of that day is to go for a new 5 rep max, a new PR. Now, eventually on the intermediate methods, you're still going to have to change up your style of training. So it's worth noting that on the Texas Method, you're still going to have that A-B split with your bench and your press. So on week 1, you'll have your volume day with your bench, then Wednesday, your light day could be your overhead press, and then you go for a maximal attempt, a new 5 rep max on bench press for Friday. The next week, then you would have the press for your volume day, bench press for your light day, and then the press you would go for 5 rep max. However, you're only going to be doing deadlifts on your test day, and on your volume day you might do power cleans and you may do snatches on Wednesday. Those are the basic recommendations for the Texas Method for general strength. If you're focusing on powerlifting, however, you may want to make some modifications. So the main question that comes out of our discussion so far of the intermediate method is, what do you do when it slows down? What do you do when it stops? Because eventually even a week-long microcycle isn't going to be enough for you to cause enough fatigue and then have a super compensation. And so what do? Well, there's tons of things you can do. Again, remember the principles first. I'm not going to go through every recommendation in the book itself. I strongly advise that you purchase the book so that you can see different ways of modifying the Texas Method for different results, such as if you're thinking about Olympic lifting more than powerlifting, or vice versa. Or if you're sports specific and you're trying to, be a successful in-season football athlete or basketball player or track athlete, what you would do to change the method, the intermediate exercises for your specific sport. So that said, there are a few things that are going to be consistent principle-wise. If you can't make 5-pound jumps and make your sets on your intensity day and drive those PRs, then there's a few things you have to do. One, you have to accumulate more fatigue during your microcycle so that you can have a super compensation. If you're doing the same work on Monday and Wednesday and you're not having the same result Friday, that means your body is adapted to the stress that you're putting yourself under. So you have to modify it. One of the things you could do would be keeping the volume approximately the same. So you have a 5x5, that means you have 25 working reps. Change your 5s to 3s and do 8 sets of 3, and then set, maybe on your intensity day, do 2 sets of 3, because you're used to doing 5 reps on Friday. So why not instead do 6 reps done in 2 sets of 3? Bump up all your weights 5 pounds from your last 5 rep max and run it on 3s until your 3s run out. Then you could lower it further, and maybe on your intensity day you actually go for a single. Then you could roll it back and start over with 5s again, and you would just have to modify it slightly. So if you've gone through these weeks of 3s, maybe you do 3 or 4 weeks where you're doing triples, and then you have 1 week where you go for a heavy single. When you go back to your 5s, remember where that was that you got stuck before on 5s, and just add 5 pounds to that. That would be the same weight that you used for your first week of 3s. And rerun the cycle. By that extra training volume that you've had on those weeks with triples, your body should have gotten stronger, and you should be able to now set a few weeks of rep PRs on 5s. When you start getting to the place where you can't do 5s anymore, drop it to 3s and repeat that cycle. That's going to allow you to, as you gain strength with 5s, then also have PRs with sets of 3, so that you can feel that you're making consistent progress. You don't always have to be going completely all out on your intensity days. Make your 5-pound rep PR, whether it's a 3 or a 5, and keep moving forward. Consistent progress is going to be important. Now, that first week when you would move to 3s, where you're only doing 5 more pounds than your previous 5 rep PR, that's going to be probably a pretty easy week. But it's still going to be training volume, and it's still going to drive your gains upward. The one thing I would say is you never want to drop your volume completely, where you're going from doing 25 working reps, a 5x5, and then taking that down to, say, 5 singles, where you're only doing 1 rep. You probably would never on your volume day want to do just singles. You'd probably always keep that at 5x5 or 8x3, because it's just going to be difficult through singles alone to get enough training volume to cause a supercompensation. Again though, the principle is you increase your volume, and also you increase the time in between testing periods of a certain 5 rep max. So, one of the things that you can do, and this is something I've done in my own training, is you keep track of all of your rep PRs, what you've done for 10, what you've done for 8, 5, everything. And so when you go up 5 pounds in your 1 rep max, that should allow you to go up 5 pounds on all of your other rep maxes. So you go through a training cycle and you set a new 10 rep max, and a new 8 rep max, and a new 5, and a new 3, and a new 2. And then you get to your test day and you set a new one again. That whole time you might only go up 5 pounds in your absolute strength, but you're setting rep PRs all along the way. That allows you to mentally know that you're moving forward even when you're using submaximal weights. And you just keep setting those PRs, you keep on consistent progress, you stay away from stalling. If all you ever did was 5s, then you're definitely going to stop at some point and you need to change it up. Moving to 3s and setting PRs there, even easy PRs where you're just adding 5 pounds to your 5 rep max and then doing 2 sets of 3 with it, it's going to be a PR for you because you haven't been doing triples yet if you've been on starting strength and the Texas method. Now, one of the questions that people consistently ask me is, well, what training program should I use? I haven't been doing anything. I've just been doing, bodybuilding splits, upper lower body splits, push-pull days, whatever. And I've been training for a year or so and these are my numbers. What should I do? Well, the answer to that is always, I have no idea what you should do. It's not until you've been on a program that you're going to know how you're responding to training. And if you're going to start, my advice to you is, find out what your 5 rep max is. And then take 90% of that and start starting strength. And make those linear jumps. Might only be 2 or 3 weeks on that before you stall out if you're already an intermediate. Then move into the Texas method. But you'll know where your true 5 rep maxes are for your whatever your lift, squat, bench, deadlift, overhead, press, because you've been on a program. And so the starting strength, even if it was just for a few weeks, starting lower than your current strength levels, that's going to let you know what your good 5 rep max is after some consistent training that then you can use for the Texas method. Again, when you transition to the Texas method, that Monday day would be a 5x5 with 90%, followed by a 2x5 with 80 to 90% of what you did on Monday, and then you go for a 5-pound rep PR on your Friday or your third day. Again, remember the principles. If you stall on the 1-week microcycle of the Texas method, lower the reps and change that up. Also, you could change some of your exercises. You could do something like your first week, you focus on your competition grip bench press for your 5x5, 2x5, and 1x5. And then the next week, you do close grip bench press, and you keep separate PRs for different exercises. Remember I said before how I would set a 10 rep max 8, 5, 3, 2, and then a 1. Well, those are all low bar. I also keep track of high bar squats and pause squats. So if I increase my low bar squat 5 pounds and I can set 5 different rep PRs with that increase on low bar, since I keep track of high bar and pause squats, all of those should be up too. So I can set 15 PRs having just gone up 5 reps. Again, this is why it's very important that you keep a training log. And if you're stalling out on bench, throw some close grip work in there. Do 3 or 4 weeks of close grip work, or alternate 1 week close grip, 1 week competition grip, and change it up. That's going to allow you to add more training volume in without coming up to the same weights over and over again, missing them, and starting to form mental blocks. Again, notice how rarely you're actually going for 1 rep maxes. You're not retesting all the time. You're building and testing, but even your testing days are with reps, so you're still getting a good amount of volume. Going into the gym and just hitting a maximum single, and then let's say on the bench press going in you max out on bench and then you do a bunch of bicep curls and tricep extensions, is not training. That's just exercise. And if you want to stay on consistent gains, then you're going to have to mess around with what PRs you're going for and your training volume. It's also absolutely possible that if on that Friday of the Texas method you're not able to set a PR, you might try to just add a couple of sets. Maybe do 7 sets of 5 on Monday with whatever lift is stalling and add a little bit extra volume in. That might be all you need. But at some point you can only do so much volume in one day before you're going to overtrain, or your workouts are going to become unmanageable because you can't spend 4 hours in the gym where you're doing 10 sets of 5 on 3 different lifts all on Monday. That's not a good idea. Again, as an intermediate, you should be able to add 5 pounds, 2.5 to 5 pounds to your lifts every week or every other week. Once you get to the point where it takes you a month of planning to add 5 pounds to a lift and set a new 5 rep max or 3 rep max, that's when you know you've moved to the advanced stage of training, where you're going to have to start thinking on month-to-month breaks, and maybe even longer than that, 6 months. And you're really going to have to plan your training out and have blocks of training devoted to maybe hypertrophy, deloads that are legitimate deloads where you take substantial tapers after high volume blocks for super compensation, and it gets a lot more in depth and also a lot more individual. Again, there's no cookie cutter programs here. This is just a basic template that you're then going to have to modify as you think about what exercises you need to do. Again, everybody responds differently. I've said before, even now, as somebody who's totaled elite powerlifting totals, I'm still increasing my squat about 5 pounds every 2 or 3 weeks, and the same with my deadlift. And my bench press is just over the advanced mark, where every 6 weeks or so I'm adding another 5 pounds to my bench press. It's not the amount of weight that you can lift that determines where you're at in your training age. Novice, intermediate, or advanced is determined by how your body responds to training stimulus. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get to them. Hope wherever you're at, you're doing well. Blessings.